Hello, we're going to be in First Corinthians chapter 7 today. We are covering the topic of marriage. So the title of our teaching is Paul Discusses Marriage. And we will be able to cover this entire chapter even though there's 40 verses because it all stays on topic. So we're going to cover it in today's teaching. Reading there in verse 1. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So it says to avoid having sex outside of marriage, then you should just get married if you have that desire to touch a man or a woman. Then it says in verse 3, let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Defraud ye not one another, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. So this is Paul speaking to the church, and he's kind of just giving them instruction about marriage. And in this, he says, whenever you are married, that the wife's body is for the man and the man's body for the wife, and so that they should give each other what they desire to have. But it says, and if they go for a time where they are not coming together, that it be with consent between both of them, and really kind of for the purpose of fasting and prayer, to kind of just to take their flesh and be focused more on spiritual things. So that's what it's saying here. And it says also that the reason they should consent about this is so that Satan doesn't come in and tempt them. Verse 6, but I speak this by permission and not of commandment. So Paul's saying this is something that the Spirit has given me permission to share with you, but it's not a commandment that you have to do this, where you have to do it in this way. He's saying, we're about the fasting and having that consent and everything. He's saying that the Spirit is leading him to share this, but that it's not a commandment of the people. Verse 7, for I would that all men were even as I myself, but every man hath his proper gift of God, one after this manner, and another after that. So Paul's reminding them again, it's good to be as I am, and here's why. It's verse 8, I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I, but if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. And unto the married I command ye, not I, but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband, but, and if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. But to the rest speak I, not the Lord, if any brother hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which hath an husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. So it's just saying that, you influence your household. So if you marry someone who is not a Christian, that you should, if they would have you, they want to stay married, that you need to stay married to them because you sanctify that household. And it also had said there in verse 10, 11, that if you marry, that you should not leave your spouse. So we are in verse 15. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God hath called us to peace. For what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband, or how knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? But as God hath distributed to every man As the Lord hath called every one, so let him walk, and so ordain I in all churches. Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not be uncircumcised. Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. And here's the reason he says this. Circumcision is nothing, in verse 19. And uncircumcision is nothing. But the keeping of the commandments of God is what is important. So they're just saying the differences in the culture here. Paul's saying it doesn't matter that these differences don't matter. But the keeping of the commandments of God there in the end of verse 19. Verse 20, let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. Art thou called, being a servant? Care not for it, but if thou mayest be made free, use it rather. For he that is called in the Lord, being a servant, is the Lord's free man. Likewise also he that is called, being free, is Christ's servant. Ye are bought with a price. Be not ye the servants of men. Brethren, let every man wherein he is called, therein abide with God. So really this is just a reminder of being a servant to the Lord in our flesh and not a servant to other people, not a servant to men. But if you find yourself being a servant to someone, that you work for someone else, then you do this, you give this service as unto the Lord. Verse 25. Now concerning virgins, I have no commandment of the Lord, yet I give my judgment as one that hath obtained mercy of the Lord to be faithful. I suppose, therefore, that this is good for the present distress. I say that it is good for a man so to be. Art thou bound unto a wife? Seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife? Seek not a wife. But and if thou marry, thou hast not sinned, and if a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh. But I spare you. But this I say, brethren, the time is short. It remaineth that both they that have wives be as though they had none, and they that weep as though they wept not, and they that rejoice as though they rejoiced not, and they that buy as though they possess not, and they that use this world as not abusing it, for the fashion of this world passeth away. But I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. Let's stop here for a second. This was saying that if two people are come together and they're both virgins, and then they actually have the ceremony later, this is not a sin. That's what he's saying there. And then it says, but I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried care for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. Reminding them again that if you remain unmarried, then you can care about the things of the Lord instead of being attached to someone and caring about the things of this world. And he goes on to say that here in just a minute. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, there in verse 33, how he may please his wife. There is difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. Now, he's re-emphasizing this point. Verse 35, and this I speak for your own profit, not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that which is comely, that ye may attend upon the Lord without distraction. So he's saying, I'm really being very specific here about these things so that you can attend to the things that you should, and in a way that you should. This is the reason that Paul is going into such detail about these things for them. Verse 36, but if any man think that he behaveth himself uncomely toward his virgin, if she pass the flower of her age, and needs so require, let him do what he will, and he sinneth not. Let them marry. That's another point of if they are virgins and they come together and then they have the ceremony later, it's not sinful. Verse 38, so then he that giveth her in marriage doeth well. but he that giveth her not in marriage doeth better. So it's saying that if they marry, they want to be together, they marry, they do well because they get married, and then they're not living in sin. But if they decide to just remain virgins and not to marry and not to come together, then they do better because they're giving their life, this flesh and this body, over to service of the Lord and caring about the things of the Lord. Verse 39, the wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth. But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord. So if someone is widowed and then they are free to remarry. See, he's just being really specific about what happens in marriages and how marriages should be handled. And so they're free to remarry, but only in the Lord, it says. So they only can remarry within a Christian person. And last verse here, verse 40, but she is happier if she so abide after my judgment. And I think also that I have the Spirit of God. So this is Paul saying, really, you would be happier if you lived as I do, not caring about the things of the world, but caring about the things of the Lord, and being able to give your life and your body over to the Lord. Paul's like, this is the life that I have chosen, and I believe that it's better. And he says, I believe I have the Spirit of God inside of me, leading me to share this too. So I thought it was really interesting what Paul discusses about marriage, and I hope that you have also found it interesting. We know that in today's society, there's many divorces and things like that, and people remarry. And when you are a Christian, then you are looked at through the filter of Christ, and so God doesn't see that weighing on you. So you don't want to have it weighing on you. This is just Paul that's giving us instruction on how we should be, and how the better of things would be. Right? We don't always follow every aspect of the word, otherwise we'd be perfect people and we would have never needed Christ to come and pay the price for our sin. But because we're not perfect in every way, and that we do make mistakes throughout our life, we do need a Savior and somebody to redeem us and to make us clean, and to wash us pure in the sight of God. So I'm sure thankful for that as a Christian myself, and I hope that you've enjoyed the teaching today. God bless you all.